There you go. Nice. Right. All right, Rabbi, good morning. Good morning. Schos Baruch Hashem to see everyone back in person. Schos Baruch Hashem, as painful as it is to leave Yerushalayim Yer HaKodesh. A great Schos Baruch Hashem to be able to come back to our base medrash to learn together. So also we have an incredible daf ahead of us today. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors, to thank our annual Talmud Torah sponsor, the Tilson Mishpacha B'Eretz Yisrael, for dedicating all the shiurim and drashos as a zechus for besoros tovos for Am Yisrael. Our Daf Yomi sponsors for today: Melon, Karen, Ram, Le'ilu Nishmas, Mel's father, Mordechai Ben Yitzchok, and Ariel Asapov, in the merit of his continued good health. In the merit of the continued good health of his mother, Arina Bas Brilliant. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, she together with Kol Cholei will have a complete and enduring refuah. Kodesh Baruch Hu Shalem Yeretz Hashem, providing aliyah to all of the neshamas and nechama to the families. Hashem should bring back the rest of our hostages b'shalom and b'karov, and our holy soldiers should be successful b'chol ma'asei yedehem. Well, with that, let us begin. We have an incredible daf today. Today's daf is Ayin 70. We are picking up at the Mishnah on Ayin Amud Aleph 78. Me'ema sechayiv. So we'll say ben sorer umora. Ben sorer umora. From what point in time is a ben sorer umora chayiv for being a ben sorer umora? So the Gemara Mishnah says, this is fascinating. So when is the ben sorer umora chayiv? When he goes in and he eats a tartimar. Now we'll discuss exactly how much a tartimar is, but when he eats a tartimar of meat and he drinks half a lug of Italian wine. Fascinating. Not Eretz Yisrael wine, not French wine, Italian wine. One second. For the wine connoisseurs, hold up. So I'll say, first of all, take a look at Rashi. Rashi says something very interesting about Yaina Italki. Tov uma'ulahu. Italian wine is the best. Rashi says, for a ben sorer umora, right? So Italian wine is the best. He says, umamshich basrei. So what we're going to see is as follows. The entire issue of a ben sorer umora is not really what he has done presently, but what we are concerned he is going to become. So part of that is developing certain appetites that he's going to get addicted to. So the Mishnah works under the assumption, and this is quite fascinating, what do people get addicted to? People get addicted to really good things. Generally, it's interesting. You don't find people getting addicted to mediocre things. They get addicted to things that provide a high. So the idea over here is he's only chayiv if he steals money to purchase very high-end wine. So in the Mishnah's time, the high-end wine came out of Italy. It was Italian wine. So if he went ahead and stole money to purchase other kinds of wine, it wasn't an issue. Okay, Rabbi Yossi argues on the measurements. He says, Mana baser v'lug yayin. He says, not a tartimar of meat, rather again, a mana of meat, and not the half a lug of wine, rather again, a whole lug of wine. Okay, so we'll see, now watch this. So that's the halacha. Aval, b'chaburas mitzvah achol, b'ibar chodesh achol. Let's say it happened that the ben sorer umora stole the money and went ahead and bought the wine, right, or bought the meat, but he consumed it in a chaburas mitzvah. This is fascinating. So he took the stolen food and he ate it, for example, in a meal that was a mitzvah. What are examples of this? For example, ibar chodesh. So we'll discuss this more in the Gemara. But again, when they would decide to go ahead and intercalate the month, right, make the month a full month of 30 days. So they would have a suda to declare that, or achol meiser sheni v'Yushalayim, or if he ate meiser sheni Yerushalayim, achol nevelos treiflos shkatzim v'ramasim, or for that matter, he ate non-kosher items. Let's say it turns out that he ate non-kosher meat. Achol tamei meiser rishon shalom nitla trumaso. Sorry, tevel. He ate tevel, which is untithed produce. Meiser rishon, that did not remember. Meiser rishon goes to the Levi, and the Levi is obligated to separate out truma from the meiser rishon. Or meiser sheni v'hektish shalom niftu, or meiser sheni or hektish that were not redeemed. So achol davar shu mitzvah, the davar shu avera. So whether he ate something that's a mitzvah or something that's an avera, so the Gemara is going to describe exactly what that's talking about. So again, so interestingly enough, so first part of the Mishnah gives us the measurements. How much wine does he have to purchase with the stolen money? How much meat does he have to purchase with the stolen money? That's Machlokas, Tanakama, and Rabbi Yossi. After that, we then have an interesting exception. That interesting exception is if he consumes the stolen meat or stolen wine in what the Mishnah calls a chaburas mitzvah, chaburas mitzvah. So halacha l'maisa again, he's going to be pater. We'll see exactly what that means as well. What happens if the Ben Sorah Umorah stole money, but he didn't purchase meat? I don't know, he purchased something else, right? Anything else, but not meat. Or shasa kamash kavalo shasa yayin. Or for that matter, again, he stole money, he purchased a drink, but he bought beer. He didn't buy wine. Eino naase ben sorah umorah achi yochal basra v'yishte yayin. So we'll say this. Exeris hakosef Torah says, Mishnah says, he does not become a ben sorah umorah until he steals money and he uses that money dafka to purchase meat or wine. Purchase of any other food item or purchase of any other drink does not make one into a ben sorah umorah. Shene'emar, the pasuk says, Zolel v'sovei. So this is the pasuk from the Torah, right? V'amru al ziknei iro b'neinu says besora umora and enu shomer kolel zolel v'sovei. Literally, again, he's a glutton and a guzzler, right? Glutton representing the meat, guzzler representing the wine. And the Gemara says, v'afa pishin right l'davar. Now, how do you know that zolel v'sovei means meat and wine, right? How do you know that? The Gemara says, even though it's not explicit, zeichel l'davar shneimar al tehi b'sovei yayin. So you see over here the lashon of sove, don't be a guzzler of wine, and don't be, again, a gluttonous consumer of meat. Okay, so we'll say, so this is the Mishnah ben Sorah Umorah. Incredible. Now let's analyze. So Rabbi Zera says, Tartimar ze'eni yodei mahu. So we'll say, so remember again, the Tana Kama said that the amount of meat for which a ben Sorah Umorah is chayiv, if he steals money and buys it, is a tartimar. So comes along the Gemara and says, Rabbi Zera says, I don't know how much is a tartimar. What is that? So the Gemara says, Al mitoch shchav Rabbi Yossi biyayin nimtza kolfa af babasar v'nimtzar tartimar chatzimana. So what we can extrapolate is as follows. Rabbi Yossi argues in the Tana Kama. Now it appears, based on the wine measurements, that Rabbi Yossi doubles the Tana Kama's measurements, right? Because again, remember the Tana Kama says tartimar of meat, a half a lug of wine. Rabbi Yossi says a mana of meat and 1 lug of wine. So the fact that he doubles the wine measurements, bepashtos means that what? He doubles the meat measurements as well, and therefore what's a tartimar? A half a mana. Now, by the way, we'll talk about actually like how much meat that is in Meretz Hashem, right? So a half a mana. So that's machlokes Rabbi Yossi Tana Kama. Incredible. So I'll just mention, Rabbi Zevi Daniel is working on getting together a chabura that meets before the daf yomi in the morning, or it doesn't have to, it could be whenever the chabura wants to meet, it could be at night also, but whatever, you'll see Zevi about that, to chazer over the shakla v'tarya, just the give and take of the Gemara. So I'll mention this because again, we're going to try to always pause, I always try to do this, but try to pause at different stages of the Gemara, just to understand when a unit has ended. So understand, in the Gemara right here, you can even just mark it off in your Gemara, so you see what the beginnings and the ends. So you see over here again, that's just a unit of discussion that just ended. Now we've clarified the machlokes, Rabbi Yossi and the Tana Kama. Next, Amrav Chana bar Molda, Amrav Huna. And so you can see Zevi. He's the striking fellow at the end of the second table. Right, good. Right after the striking fellow at the end of the first table. Right now I don't want to be everybody's beautiful. So the Gemara says as follows: Amrav Chanan bar Molda, Amrav Huna. Enu chayiv achigach basar bezol. V'yochal yayin bezol, v'yishted d'chsiv zolel v'sove. So I'll say this is very interesting. Rav Huna gives another qualification. Rav Huna says the only time you become ben Sorah Umorah is when halacha l'maisa, you're going ahead and you're purchasing the meat at a discount and purchasing the wine at a discount. This is fascinating. In other words, you can't become a ben Sorah Umorah if you play retail, right? If you pay retail, you might not even be Jewish. Forget about a ben Sorah Umorah, right? So you're only halacha l'maisa ben Sorah Umorah if you get at a discount. Now what's the pshat with that? Take a look at Rashi. Yayin bizol aval b'yoker lo shchichi le'mos. Remember again, let's work backwards because we've already seen this, but we'll see more explicitly today. Why is a ben Sorah Umorah executed? Why is he executed? Because we are nervous that someone who has developed these type of appetites when he's young is going to become addicted to sustaining this type of lifestyle and is not going to have the necessary funds to sustain constant consumption of meat and wine. And what's going to happen? He's going to rob, he's going to steal, and he's going to become a community danger. So the idea over here is, it only works if you see him developing the behaviors that would lead us to that tragic conclusion. So in other words, if he's already able to figure out how to get wine, that's the chap, good wine cheaply, good meat cheaply, that means that there's like a shtickle addiction going on over here. And that's what gives rise to this concern. Say, get ready for this. Furthermore, he's only chayiv if he eats raw meat and drinks undiluted wine. Now the Gemara says, 1 second, you need really raw meat, undiluted wine? That's not true. That's not true. After all, Gemara says an explicit statement that if he eats raw meat and he drinks undiluted wine, the side of Israel says it's not normal. It's not normal to eat raw meat. So the Gemara says, Ravina, no. Yayin chai is mazug velo mazug. No, undiluted wine doesn't literally mean undiluted. Rather, what does it mean? It means that it's not fully dilution. In other words, he uses a lower dilution ratio, right? So the wine is stronger. That's the chap, right? What does it mean, basar chai? This is incredible. What does it mean, raw meat? Raw meat doesn't mean raw meat. Rather, what does it mean? Bashil velo bashil. It means cooked, but not really cooked. Kibasar kiba da'achla ganvi. Like the type of seared meat that thieves eat. Now look at Rashi. Rashi's almost right across. Basar kiva the achal ganvi. Kavya begechalim dikavase be'irevin v'nichbe v'nich bo b'zachem. So it's fascinating. How did thieves eat their meat? How do they eat their meat? Right? They seared it. They seared it on the outside and it was rare on the inside. By the way, I feel very vindicated because I get a very hard time for eating everything very, very, very well done. But you see, all I am is a halachic Jew. That's all. Apparently, just the rest of the chevra who eats stuff red, right? And it's seared on the outside and it's seared on the inside. You need to do a cheshbon hanefesh. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying, right? Again, clearly, that's how thieves eat their meat. Pan-seared steak is mamish a Michael of Ganovim. Okay, that's a mic drop. That's a mic drop right there. Okay, Zevi, get that in the shaklatariya, by the way. All right. The Gemara says, so again, I will say, so all of this also, remember, what we're looking for over here, if you notice, are interesting behaviors. That's what we're looking for over here. There are markers that are here. So already, like again, all kidding aside, in the Gemara, what does this represent? Thieves, right? One of the luxuries that thieves don't have is relaxation, right? They're on the move, they're on the run, always looking for the next mark, everything else like that. So that's why, in all seriousness, they just sear the meat and then they go ahead and they eat it. So when we see someone from a young age exhibiting these types of behaviors, it becomes the marker for us. It becomes the danger sign that something is up, and again, unfortunately, this child is on a terrible, almost irreversible path. The Gemara goes weiter. Rabbi Yossi Tamartavayu, Achol Basar Maliach, V'Shasi Amigito, Enunas Ben Soramar. So this is fascinating. So Rabbi Yossi said as follows. Both of them said, if the Ben Soramar eats salted meat, or he drinks wine from the press, that doesn't make you a Ben Soramar. Now, this is very interesting. Salted meat was considered to be inferior, and therefore, interestingly enough, from that Torah's perspective, non-habit forming. Wine right off the press is inferior, and therefore, again, non-habit forming. So therefore, if you have a boy who steals money from his parents and uses that money to buy salted meat, or to go out and buy wine right off the press, halacha l'maisa, again, that does not make him into a ben sora umor. Take a look at Rashi. Rashi's right across. Basar malech v'yamigito lo chashivi. They're not important. They're not chashiv. Therefore, v'lo mamshich. Ultimately, again, they're not habits forming. They're not habit forming. Which will say such a right. Okay, we'll come back to that in just a little bit. The Gemara goes right there. The Gemara says, Tanan Hasam. Now, obviously, the shaila is going to be, what's the definition of salted meat, and what's the definition of wine right from the press? Okay, so that's our next order of business. So both say, this is a fascinating halacha. Tanan Hasam, all part of our sugya. Erev Tisha B'Av. So on Erev Tisha B'Av, we'll say, Sudim Afsekes, right? Remember again, we should always recognize in halacha, 2 times a year you have Sudim Afsekes, right? 2 times a year. One before Tisha B'Av, one before Yom Kippur, but of course, they are worlds apart, right? They're worlds apart. The Sudim Afsekes before Yom Kippur is a Yom Tov Suda. It's mamishi yom tov su'uda, right? It is a celebratory su'uda, excited for the cleansing and the tshuva that's about to come. Right? It's interesting. Even also when you talk about Yom Kippur, like you have like butterflies in your stomach, like excited for that. So it is almost evil. Excited for that upcoming opportunity to mamish cleanse ourselves. Conversely, Erev Tisha B'Av Su'uda Mafsakes is a morning meal. Right, with M-O-U-R, right? A mournful meal. That is not a celebratory meal, but ultimately, again, that is a meal that kind of already puts us in, there are restrictions on that meal. So therefore, the Gemara says, Erev Tisha B'Av, Lo yochal adam shnei tavshilin, a person should not eat two cooked foods at the Suda Mafsekes. You can't have two different cooked foods. Lo yochal basar lo yishteh yayin. You can't eat meat and you can't drink wine. Listen to this. V'tana, aval, listen to this. Ochalu basar maliach v'shosei yayin migito. Wow. What can you eat on Erev Tisha B'Av? Salted meat. You want to have beef jerky at your Suda Mafsekes? You can. You can. Interestingly enough, you could have salted meat. Or we'll see, right? You could have salted meat and you could have wine. If there's any left, in the veld, right? So you could have salted meat, and you could go ahead and you could drink wine right from the press. Right from the press. Now, both say, now, before I go on, what does that show you? What does that show you? That shows that these items don't even have the identity of meat or identity of wine. That's, in other words, that's serious. To say that you can eat it on Erev Tisha B'Av, mamish means that it's not basar and it's not yayin. So the Gemara says, so the Gemara says, now obviously we have to get definitionally, what are these things? So this is interesting. Now obviously, it can't mean that a person puts some salt on their meat and suddenly again that's salted meat. What in other words, when we speak about salted meat, pepashus, what are we talking about? We're talking about meat that is packed in salt. So how long does meat have to be salted for so that it loses its identity as basar and becomes basar maliach? So the Gemara says as follows: Basar maliach ad kama. So as long as it's like shlamim, what does that mean? The window for shlamim consumption is 2 days and 1 night. So essentially, once you've salted meat for 2 days and 1 night, that's called salted meat, and it really loses its identity as meat. Now, I want to be clear on something. When we say loses its identity as meat, if you eat it, you're fleishiks, right? I don't know, just to be clear, right? You're going to be fleishiks. But the idea is for other halachos that concern basar, it's not basar. So if a ben sorah morer steals money and purchases that kind of salted meat, he's not chayiv. You want to eat that meat on Erev Tisha B'Av, you can eat that meat even on Erev Tisha B'Av. So that seems to, if you look at Rashi says there, calls man shuk shlamim, shelo over alav zman achila shlamim, shnei yomim v'layla echad, adayin belich luchusahu v'lo ikri maliach. Shabbos says, so this is the idea. The window of shlamim is our metric. You can eat shlamim for 2 days and 1 night. So too again, if you leave the meat salted 2 days and 1 night, then it's salted meat. And again, Ben Soramor is not going to be chayiv for it. And halacha l'maisa, you can eat it even on Erev Tisha B'Av. So the Gemara says, what about wine? Up until what point in time is wine called wine from the press? I want you to understand. Remember, fresh wine was inferior. Aged wine was good wine. So when is wine considered to be what we call wine from the press, i.e. fresh wine? That's inferior. When it's, the Gemara says, ad kama calls manshu toses, when it's fermenting. Toses means fermenting. Apparently, Rashi points out over here, the way you know that wine is fermenting is like a shtick of froth. So when it's frothing, that means that the wine is fermenting. That's yayin migito. Good. So therefore, we'll say again, for our purpose. So that's finished. Actually, so just to pause over for a second. So therefore, what we are establishing over here is that a ben sorah moreh is chayiv for stealing money and purchasing wine and meat. We've established already from the Mishnah, zolel v'sovei, machlokes, how much he has to steal, how much wine, how much meat. But now definitionally, wine means good wine. Good wine. The Mishnah called it Italian wine, but right now the Gemara is just saying it's got to be wine. Wine for our purposes means it's not fermenting. It's not fermenting. Furthermore, meat means non-salted meat. What's the definition of salted meat? Halacha l'maaseh, any meat that is sat in salt for at least 2 days and 1 night. Incredible. Let's go weiter. So the Gemara says, Vatanya. We learned Yayin Toses Imam Mishum Gilui, that fermenting wine, Rabosai, is not subject to the halacha of Gilui. Now remember again, what's the halacha of Gilui? The halacha says that if you leave mashkim megulin, if you leave liquids open overnight, you're not allowed to drink it. What are we concerned about? Right, what is Gemara concerned about? Snake venom. Now I'll just point out, by the way, we know this Aruch HaShulchan brings down that today many people aren't makbid on this anymore, right? I leave a drink out overnight, I leave a cup of water out, overnight, and we do drink it the next day. So the Gemara says, Aruch HaShulchan says that's because, again, we live in locales where venomous snakes are not really as common, and that's why again you'll see in general people are not makbid on. In any event, the point over here is frothing, right? Fermenting wine is not subject to the halacha of uncovered liquids. Apparently snakes don't come next to fermenting wine. So how long does that process last for? Shlosha yamim, 3 days. So apparently for the first 3 days after the wine is first created, after it's pressed, it's still in the state of fermentation, and therefore again, halacha l'maisa, there's no issue of gilui. Hacha mai. So we'll say, interestingly enough, so the reason Gemara is bringing this up over here is, beforehand we said that the definition of fermenting wine is as long as it's frothing. Here it says 3 days. Now the pashtos, it sounds like the wine froths for even longer than 3 days. So what's the halacha over here by Ben Sora Mar? In other words, we need to know what kind of wine is he chayev for stealing. Hachamai. So the Gemara says, Hasam mishum simchahu. So ultimately, again, when it comes to, let's say, for example, Tisha B'Av, right? So when it comes to Tisha B'Av, so remember again, it's a din in simcha. So therefore, again, as long as the meat is like shlamim, i.e., it's been salted for less than 2 days and 1 night, then it's considered to be meat, and there's going to be an element of simcha. By Ben Sora Marabosai, it's not a din in simcha. What is it a din in? What is it in din in? Addiction. That's the developing app. I hesitate to use that word addiction because that word is often used very loosely, but we'll use it now. We're worried about him being drawn into a particular lifestyle. So the Gemara says, in order for the Ben Sora Mora for there to be a fear of addiction to the high life, so ultimately again, it has to be something of really high quality. So even if the Gemara seems to say, even if halacha l'maisa is salted for less time, it could still be that would not be a din, or that would not be subject ultimately again to ben sora umora. V'yayin ad mem yom, but for wine up to 40 days. So up to 40 days after it's been pressed, it's still considered to be fermenting, and therefore halacha l'maisa, the ben sora umora would not be chayav for that. And I will say, now it happens to be, it appears from the Gemara. It appears from the Gemara that halacha l'maisa, that for Ben Sora Umora, we adopt the shlamim metric. So if it's salted meat, and the definition of salted being 2 days and 1 night, if he steals money and purchases that meat, he's not going to be chayiv. He's only chayiv if he purchases what we'll call fresh meat. With wine, same idea. Only chayiv for wine if it's not fermenting. What's the definition of not fermenting? It's not bubbling, it's not frothing. But if it's still frothing, then ultimately again he's not going to be chayiv. Incredible. We both say beautiful Gemara. Amrav Chanan, lo nivra ba'olam, Amrav Chanan, lo nivra yain ba'olam. Why did Hashem create wine? Right? They both say it's a good shaila. Why? It's interesting, by the way. Wine is fascinating. Why? Because on one hand, there's no life cycle event without wine. Right? A bris milah has wine. A chuppah has wine. Right? We're going to see a levaya had wine. Everything has wine. Yet we see that Chazal say that wine can get you into so much trouble. So what's the pshat? Why did the Rebbe Shalom really create wine? So incredible Gemara. Hashem created wine. El lenachim avelim or l'shalim schal l'rishoyim. Hashem created wine really for 2 primary purposes. Number 1, to give comfort to mourners. Now, what does this mean? If you remember again, the Gemara Maseches Moed Katan, if you remember again, we learned that when the Avelim would come back after the funeral, what would they get? They would get a big glass of wine. A big glass of wine. They were encouraged to drink the entire thing. Why? We understand why. Because what did it do? It took the edge off. It took the edge off a little bit, right? It didn't take away the pain, but ultimately, again, it went ahead and soothed. Rabbi said there's a tremendous Moshe Haskell in this. So what does this mean? So you're going to give the aval a cup of wine. Shkoyach, what does it do for them? Rabbi said in life, there are 2 different types of problems. There are some problems you could solve, and there are some problems that you can fix. And then there are other problems that you cannot solve and you cannot fix, and they are just what they are. And what you need to figure out ultimately is how to lean into it, is how to embrace it, is how to just own it and to say, okay, this is my life. These are my circumstances. No matter what I do, they're not going to change. Let me take a life deep breath, bend my shoulder, lean into it, and somehow make something great out of these circumstances. That is the point of that cup of wine. That cup of wine is the forced deep breath. Because we all know this. When you have a glass, what happens when you have a glass of wine? What happens when you have 3 glasses of wine? I'm getting the blank looks over here, right? What happens, because 2 is zugos, right? 2 is zugos, right? When I have 3 glasses of wine, suddenly again, you know what? The problems don't look. I'm not foolish. My problems are still there. You need at least 6 glasses of wine to have no problems, right? With 3, right? I know my problems are still there. But you know what? Okay, I'll handle it. I'll handle it. When, how, what? I don't know, but I know I got this. I got this. The stuff that looked impossible before the glass of wine now looks possible with the glass of wine. I will say it's such a trend. So why did Hashem create wine? Hashem created wine to help us take that collective deep breath, or that personal deep breath, and be able to say, okay, for the Avel, I've just lost someone that I loved. My life is forever different. It'll never be the same. But somehow, some way, I will get this together and move myself forward. That's the yesod of wine, says the Gemara. Furthermore, I will say, but again, without the wine, also the hashkafa also applies. Life's problems in 2 different buckets. The one you could solve, the ones you can't. The ones you can't. The ones you could solve, roll up your sleeves and create the solution. The ones you can't, lean into it. Embrace it, accept it, and navigate that new reality. So again, furthermore, wine was also created for Rishaim. For Rishaim. What does this mean? Even the greatest of Rishaim, right? Even the most wicked person does mitzvahs. Does things that are good, right? And halacha l'maisa deserves reward for it. How does he get his reward for it? A good bottle of wine. Good bottle of wine, right? That's the reward for his shaim, and therefore they get their reward in this world, and judgment and punishment in the next world. Shneimar tenu shechar la'oved nefesh, tenu shechar la'oved v'yayin lamari nefesh. Literally, again, give an intoxicating beverage la'oved to the one who is lost, which the Gemara is understanding over here to refer to the Rasha, and give wine to those who are bitter of soul. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, mai dichsev alter yayin kiyis adam. What does it mean when it says the pasuk alter yayin shemadim pneim shalisham ba'olam hazeh umal b'pnei le'olam haba? So it's to be careful with wine. Because what does wine do? Wine makes the face of the Rishaim red, right? When you drink a little bit, so you get a little bit flushed. So the Rishaim get red, they get flushed with the enjoyment of this world, but they will be pale in the world to come. Meaning again, so enjoy it, Rishaim, right? Enjoy the wine and enjoy whatever is coming to you in this world, because know that judgment awaits you in the world to come. Rava Amar Alter Yain Kiyis Adam, Alter Yain Shacharis Adam. Be careful with wine. Be careful with wine, because we'll say sometimes too much consumption of wine could lead to blood, meaning could lead to certain deleterious results. Rav Kahana Ramiksiv, so Rav Kahana contrasted 2 psukim. On one hand, it says tirash vikarinan tirosh. So we'll say it's quoting over here. It's quoting over here from the pasuk of these are the brachos. These are the brachos of Yitzchak Avinu to Yaakov. V'yitein lecha Elokim. Again, we say someone says Shabbos. V'yitein lecha Elokim mital Hashem mishmani haaretz v'rov dagan v'sirosh. The both say sirosh means grapes, but what the Gemara is pointing out over here is it's written chaser. It's written without the vav, so it can be read as tirash. Right? It could be looked right. You see it, it's tirash, but yet we read it as tirosh. Tirosh. So we'll say, what's the difference? Listen to this. Zacha naase rosh. Lo zacha naase rash. So we'll say, alcohol, right? Alcohol, wine, could be used in one of 2 ways. Alcohol could be used, chas v'shalom, as a mechanism of profound personalistic debasement, right? And a person can engage in all type of terrible behaviors, or sometimes we both say, nichnas yayin yatzasod. Sometimes what wine has the ability to do is It lowers our guard a little bit, lowers some of those inhibitions, and the real me is able to come out in a good way. I was supposed to say, sometimes, whether we recognize it or not, we're so guarded about the holiness that we possess. Right? I don't, so we put up walls. Piaget speaks about this so much. We put up walls around our neshama. And those walls, we block ourselves from fully spiritually self-actualizing. But sometimes a little bit of wine comes in. The walls come down. And my real neshama is able to come out. So interesting that the same thing, wine, could either be tirash, rash means like a pauper, like a nothing. For some people, wine unlocks debasement, and for other people, tirosh, like a head. A little bit of wine can lower those walls and allow me to finally access my neshama. Incredible. Rav Arami Ksiv, so the Gemara says, yismach or yishmach, vikarinon yismach. So again, according to the pasuk, v'yayin yisamach levav enosh. Wine makes the heart happy. So again, it's not vocalized. It can be read yishmach or yismach. So the Gemara says, lo zacha, zacha misamcho. If a person is righteous, then ultimately again, wine will go ahead and cause the person much joy. Lo zacha, if on the other hand the person is not zocha, mishamamehu. Wine could destroy him. So you will say, the whole chap of wine, without wine, I will say, anyone could project an image of personal piety. What does wine do? Wine gets out the inner you. And then I will say, then when that inner me comes out, that's when the true me comes out. So the shaila is, who am I really on the inside? Am I a rasha chas v'shalom masquerading as a tzaddik? Or perhaps, again, I'm really a mediocre guy, or I should say I'm a tzaddik masquerading as a mediocre guy. And ultimately a little bit of wine is able to show what is really on the inside of the individual. Incredible. Rava said, wine and nice smells, right, aromatic smells made me very smart. So what Rava was saying was like this, that a little bit of wine helped me to access a lot of my inner kedusha. And I also remember again, the scent of smell is also linked directly to the neshama, right? Because remember again, when Hashem created Adam and Chava, the Pasuk says, "Vayipach ba'apav." Hashem blew life into the nostrils of Adam. So the sense of smell is directly connected with the neshama. Which is why Matzah Shabbos we have besamim, right? Why we have besamim. That's why some even have some have the custom to smell besamim on erev Shabbos as well. All of that to unlock the neshama. Incredible. Amar Rav Amram, Rabbi Shmuel Bar Abba. By the way, it's interesting. Rava says that it's wine and sense that made me smart. What about like learning, right? I came to Shir, I went to yeshiva, I went to this. So let's say, what you see from Rava is something very interesting, that so much of self-actualization is not just about the information you learn, but it's your ability to access your insides, right? So often in life what we do is we're walled off to who we are on the inside. So I spend a lot of time like on external things. I daven a lot, I learn a lot, but then I wonder like, why doesn't it have the full impact on me? And the answer is very simple. If you're not in touch with your inner self, you can't fully self-actualize. You have to know your neshama. You have to be connected to your neshama. You have to understand who I really am on the inside. That's why Rava says, you're right, of course I learned a lot of Torah, Rava says. Of course Rava learned a lot of Torah. But in addition to all the Torah, Rava says, I also knew who I was on the inside. That's what wine and besamim represent. I know I'm in touch with my inner self. I'm in touch with who and what I am, about what's working, what's not working, what's whole, what's broken. And because of that, because I'm in touch with my inner self, I'm able to become the best version of me. Incredible. What's the meaning of the pasuk? Lemi avi, lemi avoy, lemi medanim, lemi siach, lemi petzaim chinam, lemi chachlilos inayim, lema'achrim alayayim lebayim lach kami masach. So let's interpret this pasuk now. So this pasuk, by the way, the Gemara is quoting over here, is from Mishlei. And essentially what Shlomo HaMelech is lamenting over here, by the way, is overindulgence in wine. by overindulgence in wine. So the Gemara says as follows: ultimately, however you interpret this pasuk, because also what the pasuk essentially is saying is Lemi I, right? Who is the one who has to say woe? Lemi avai. Who's the one who has to say right? Who's the one who says I? Who's the one who says vavai? Right? Lemi madana, lemi siach. So ultimately, again, who are the people who overindulge? And the end of the pasuk is Lema achrim alayayin. Those who spend too much time with wine. And remember, I guess Shlomo Melech understood this firsthand because Shlomo Melech had everything. So Shlomo Melech also understood, and we'll get into this more, about the destructive nature of overindulgence. So the Gemara says you could dash in this pasuk from the beginning to the end, from the end to the beginning, it's the same drasha. Darash Oved Galila. Yud Gimel Vavin. So we'll say, right, Darish over Galila. So a certain guy who lived in the Galil darshan the following idea. Interestingly enough, he's anonymous. It's quite fascinating. But he made the following drasha. What was his drush? Listen to this. This is fascinating. Yud Gimel Vavin Ne'emru B'yayin. There are 13 vavs that are said in conjunction with wine. Now, what does it mean in conjunction with wine? Well, let's remember again. The first time we have mention of wine is where? Noach. So 13 vavs in the section of Noach with wine. If you look at Rashi is over here, Yud Gimel Vavin, Lashon Vai. So we'll say, so what does that mean? Now, Vav, remember, Vav often represents Vai. Vai means, loose translation of Vai is Oi, right? Loose translation, right? Vai means, so what this certain Galilean was saying was, it's interesting that there's a lot of ois, a lot of woes in the section concerning wine by Noach. So the Gemara says, listen to this. Now here they are. Vayachal Noach vav ish adama vayita keren vayesh min hayayin. So two vavs right there. Again, you'll count it as we go along. So vayichal, vayesh. So again, this when Noach got off the teva, the first thing he did was he planted a vineyard. Right? Vayera var vayar cham avi Canaan es ervas aviv vayage l'shneim echav b'chutz. Right? So cham. So remember again, Noach gets drunk. He falls asleep. He's naked, or at least in some state of disrobement. Cham sees his father in this state, comes and sees the other brothers. Vayikach, another vav. Shem v'yafas, another vav. Esas Simla, Vayasimu, another vav, Al Shechem Shneim. So Cham does nothing, right? Well, actually, we'll see he does something, but so Shem and Yefes come, they walk in backwards, they cover up their father. Vayechu, another vav, Acharonis, Vayachas, another vav, Eser Vasavim, Upaneim, another vav, Vayikatz Noach, another vav. Noach wakes up, from his wine. Vayed, another vav, Eis asher asalo b'noach. So we'll say this is the story of Noach. So remember again, Cham just sees his father, doesn't do anything, tells his brothers, Shem and Yefes come and they cover up their father in his state of debasement. Noach wakes up and the pasuk says Noach knew what his son Cham did to him. Rabbi Shmuel, so both sides, obviously it's interesting. Obviously, Cham did something to Noach. The issue is the pasuk doesn't say what Cham did to Noach. So there's machlokes. Rabbi Shmuel Chad Amar Sirsu. One opinion says that Cham castrated his father. The Chad Amar Revo. Other opinion says that Cham went ahead and sodomized his father. Okay, the Gemara Amar Sirsu, the one who says that he castrated him, mitosh kilo baravi. So also the one who says castrated. Now, why would Cham castrate his father? He didn't want his father having any more kids. 3 of us is enough. He didn't want any more kids. So therefore, again, just like Cham went ahead and prevented his father from having a 4th son, so Noach cursed Cham's 4th son. Who was Cham's 4th son? Cham's 4th son, Rabbi say, was Cush. Right? Sorry, Cush was put to Canaan. Right? So Cham's 4 sons were Cush, Mitzrayim, put to Canaan. So just like Cham prevented Noach from having a 4th son, Noach cursed Cham's 4th son. Oman Damarivo, the one who says that he sodomized them, Gomer Vayar, Ksiv Hacha Vayar Cham, right? Agvi Canaan, Es Ervas Aviv, Ksimasam, Vayar Osa Shechem ben Chamor. When Shechem abducted and violated Dinah. And again, there Rabbi again, Chazal tell us that he violated her with Bia Shelo Kidarka. So the Gemara said, so ultimately, again, so it makes sense. The one who says that he castrated him and prevented him from having a fourth son, it makes sense then that Noach cursed Ham's fourth son. But according to the one who says that he sodomized him, why did he curse him in his fourth son? Why not just curse his first son? To which the Gemara says, according to that opinion that he sodomized him, he both sodomized him and castrated him. Okay, so no life lessons there. Okay, the Gemara says as follows. So what happened? So the pasuk says Noach profaned himself and he planted a vineyard. So again, I will say, so just to point out over here, the lashon over here is incredibly important. The Ribono Shel Olam is bringing Noach to task for the first thing that he does in the new world is he plants a vineyard. That's lashon of chulin. He profaned himself. Noach, right? Noach, what are you doing? Why is the first thing that you're doing planting a vineyard? Shouldn't you be learning from Adam Arishon? Shelo garam lo ela yayin. The both say this is wild. What caused Adam and Chava to make their mistake? It was wine. So the Gemara says, now one second, what does that mean? The both say we're going to see, interestingly enough, that there is a fundamental machlokes. What type of tree did Adam and Chava eat from? Right? Remember again, they ate from the Eitz Das Tovara, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What did they eat from? This is machlokes. There's a machlokes. Desanya, Rabbi Meir Omer, Os Ilan Sha'achal Adam Arishon Gefen Haya. So we'll say, first opinion, Rabbi Meir says it was grapes. The forbidden fruit was grapes. So as such, Adam Arishon's sin was committed with grapes. So now Noach gets off the teva, and what's the first thing that he plants? Grapes. Kadosh Baruch Hu says, what's the matter with you? What are you doing? Did you not learn from Adam Arishon? I'll say, Amud Beis. She'ein l'chad davar she'mevi yilal Adam ela yayin. And I will say, interesting, Rabbi Meir says, now where does Rabbi Meir get this from? It's almost as if Rabbi Meir backs into this, because Rabbi Meir says, there is nothing which brings misfortune upon a person like wine. Obviously, I will say, it's two sides of the same coin. On the other hand, we extol all of the greatness of wine, the power of wine, the beauty of wine. But wherever you have the possibility for extreme kedusha, which is what wine has, you also have the power for extreme debasement. Which I will say, by the way, I just want to point out, I can answer the cover over here, which is why it really is important, besides supporting the economy of Eretz Yisrael, to really drink Israeli wine. Right? Again, we're living in a time where Eretz Yisrael has the most incredible and beautiful award-winning wines. There's absolutely, I don't have like shares in anything. I just want to be clear. It's not a business thing, right? But we live in a time where Eretz Yisrael is producing the most beautiful and award-winning wines. There's another reason for it. Wine is dangerous. Wine, we see it from Chazal. Wine is really dangerous. I think that one of the ways we help to offset that danger a little bit is making sure that our wine is coming from a place of Kiddush and Tara. So if I know at least that a wine comes from Eretz Yisrael, it's grown in the holy soil of Eretz Yisrael, I have absolutely no doubt. I don't know how it's true, but I know that it's true. That if wine comes from the holy soil of Eretz Yisrael, by definition, that wine has a Kiddush that other wines do not have. And therefore, by definition, I think one has the ability to utilize that wine in a much more kaddish way than they can with any other type of wine. Okay, the infomercial is over. Any event. So the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says, so therefore, wine, right? Wine comes along, ela yayin. So therefore, again, that's why Kadosh Baruch Hu brings Noach to task. How can you go ahead and be planting wine when Adam Rishon got into trouble with wine? Rabbi Yehuda says, no, it wasn't wine. What was it? Chitahaya. It was wheat. The eitz is fascinating. The eitz das tovara was wheat. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that wheat grew differently in Gan Eden? Or just maybe eitz was just more of like a description, not to be taken literally? But eventually, Rabbi Yehuda says it was wheat. Because we'll say, interestingly enough, wheat in Dazra, when a child begins, it's interesting, because wheat really represents like the first consumption of like solids. So when a child begins to consume solids, so again, there's a certain level of das that comes with that. Rabbi Nechemia says, no, it was a Tena was a fig. Niskanu. I will say why? Because the very thing that they sinned with was the very thing that they covered themselves with. Shene'emar vayitparu alei te'ena. Remember, after Adam and Chava eat from the Eitz Das Tov Ra, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they recognized that they were naked. So what did they do? They covered themselves. Now Chazal tell us elsewhere, none of the other trees wanted to give them their leaves because they sinned. The fig tree gave them the leaves because, again, that was the tree with which they went ahead and they sinned. So we'll say, by the way, just fascinating, three machlokes as to what Adam and Chava sinned with. Opinion number 1, grapes. Opinion number 2, wheat. Opinion number 3, figs. Interestingly enough, what will you never find mentioned in Chazal? Apples, right? So where does that come from? Where does that come from? Right? Because that Adam and Chava ate the apple. So we'll say it's an interesting connection. Remember by Yitzchak Avinu, when Yaakov comes along and comes in masquerading as his brother Esav. So remember, Yaakov comes in, Yitzchak thinks that it's Esav, and remember what are the words that Yitzchak uses? He says, Re'eh, Reach b'ni kareach hasada. The scent of my son is like the scent of the field. Rashi HaKadosh says, scent of the field. When somebody's murdering and butchering animals, they stink. What does that mean? So no, he says, Yitzchak Avinu was referring to kareach hasada was Gan Eden. And Rashi HaKadosh quotes the Medrash that says, what's the reach of Gan Eden? Gan Eden smells kistei tapuchim, like an apple orchard. Gan Eden has the scent of an apple orchard. So that's the scent of Gan Eden. Rashi quotes that. So somehow, and that's a fact. So I guess somehow it evolved that because Gan Eden has the scent of an apple orchard, so it became assumed that Allah Adam and Chava ate from an apple. But Lamaisa, you see over here, there is no man damar that says it was an apple. One of these three. In any event, so according to the opinion that says that Allah Lamaisa it was grapes, so Hashbaruch Hu takes Noach to task for going ahead and planting grapes. So we'll say incredible Gemara. Divrei Lemuel Melech Masa Asher Yisarsu Imo. Okay, so we'll say get ready for this. These are the words of Lemuel. And Lemuel was chastised by his mother. Right? King Lemuel was chastised by his mother. Even kings get chastised by their mother. So what is this? First I will say, who is Lemuel? So Rashi points out over here, Lemuel is Shlomo HaMelech. Lemuel Maisa V'chachmas LaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we'll say Lemuel is a contraction of two words, Lamo Kel. That all he was an attribute to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we'll say for this Gemara. Shlomo HaMelech was rebuked by his mother. What did his mother say? Listen to this. Get ready. Shekafaso ima ala amud. So Bathsheba, remember again. So Shlomo HaMelech's mother is Bathsheba. Bathsheba literally tied Shlomo to a post and was ready to flog him. That shows you how angry parents could get with children, right? And everybody say, this is an adult son. She tied him to it. Now, she wasn't really going to flog him, but rather she wanted to put a little fear of God into him. So V'amrlo, she said to him, Mabri, Umar bar bitni, Umar bar nidri. She said to him, what are you doing, my son? Marbari, my son, the son of my womb, the son of my vow. What are you doing? So the Gemara says, Mabri, what was Bathsheba chastising Shlomo about? Hako yodim, shavicha yarei shamayim. Everyone knows your father, David HaMelech, is such a big tzaddik. What we're going to see is, Shlomo was living the high life. Right? He's the son of the king, right? He's got money, he's good looking, he's got everything going for him. See, he's living the good life. And his mother is chastising him for too much overindulgence. And the first thing she says to him is, you know what people are going to say? David's a tzaddik. It must be that this side of Shlomo, that must come from the mother's side. That must come from the mother's side, right? So people are going to hinge all of your overindulgent, errant behavior on me. Omar bar bitni, and the son of my womb, Kol anashim shal beis avicha, all of your fathers, other wives, cave and Shemes once they become pregnant, they no longer have relations with the king. So apparently, from Chazal's perspective, so relations during pregnancy is healthy for the fetus. So Bathsheba said to her son, said to Shlomo, you know me, even after I was pregnant with you, I made sure to have relations with your father in order that you would be a healthy and vibrant child. Very interesting parent-child conversation, right? But Lamaisa, she says, you see, I worked so hard for you, and this is what you gave me back. Umar Barbary, so we'll say, you know what we'll do? We'll stop, I'm leaving on the cliff. We'll stop over here, we'll say, again, we're fine, by the way. The dapim gets short in Makkos, so we're gonna be fine. We're gonna be fine. We'll say, what's the rush? What's the rush? Shkaya Chevra, one to go back to the Chevra. All right, Chavran Zoom. Have a great day, everyone.